I specialize on information technology, and I happen to implement network infrastructure projects, and during the course of today's presentation I will be speaking about how we can increase the security of your corporate network by using Cisco ISE, that is policy compliance. So we will be just checking policy compliance, whether it fits the corporate security policy, and microsegmentation. We're going to elaborate on microsegmentation as well. So I would like to briefly describe Cisco IS. You may be familiar with that. Maybe you've even implemented the solutions based on that. But still, I would like to say a few words as the introduction. Cisco IS is just like an asteroid with radius server, with quite a lot of additional features attached. Therefore, we can be getting quite a lot of interesting context information that can be used for policy, access policies. Cisco IS, just like any other service, can help us get access to the information about the attempts to connect to the network, as well as the authentication attempts, and verify whether this device is going to be connected or not, is going to be allowed in the network or not. Here we can see what it looks like, taking into account the context. We can learn who has established the connection, which device was used for that, which time, what type of connectivity was established, whether it was a wireless connection or a wired connection or some kind of remote access, and based upon that information we can actually make a conclusion about whether we can let this device into our network or reject the access. Posture assessment, in other words, policy compliance. Why do we need these functions, and when do we need to use them? I would like to start with the introduction thing. Quite a lot of companies have started using remote access, and you may be aware that at a certain time we just had to work remotely, and the companies started handing out laptop PCs to their employees so that they can connect to the corporate network remotely, and some of the employees have been allowed to get access to the corporate network from their own devices. However, we do not sometimes see all of these devices checked for compliance, and as far as the corporate devices are concerned, sometimes we can trust the corporate ones, but not always. When speaking about the personal devices, there are quite a lot of issues arising. We cannot guarantee that all of these devices have not been infected, do not have any vulnerabilities. For example, if we let some of such devices into our corporate network, there may be a risk rising of compromising the whole security of the enterprise. It may also relate to some local physical connections. When we have handed out a laptop PC to the employee and he had traveled on business for a month, he had been connecting to different websites, downloading various types of software, and he had not been updating his antivirus software. Then he returns and he connects to the corporate network using his credentials. This device is not checked and verified, and this employee gets access to the whole network and maybe the source of infection, so to speak, to the whole network. Therefore, policy compliance is necessary here, so that we can test and verify all these devices for whether they comply with our antivirus requirements and so forth. Now we're going to take a closer look at the access control. Speaking in terms of the corporate network, we have Cisco ISE, authentication, access control are provided, and the state of the users is also monitored. Authentication procedure is conducted, the type of connectivity is verified, whether this particular user has got credentials and his device is verified for all of the matches. Password and login authentication is also conducted. In case of a failed authentication, the rejection profile is engaged, which rejects this user from connecting to the network. If everything goes well, the next step occurs. On this step, we verify whether this device had previously been assessed for security requirements, and if we expect this device to be compliant, the status will have to turn to compliant. But here the security posture puts it as unknown, therefore they will put it into a limited access area from where we can get access only to the Cisco IS service, just to verify the future state. We verify different criteria on later stages, so we can learn about the operating system being installed on the PC, whether there have been updates installed, whether the fixes have been installed, hot fixes, whether the antivirus software is engaged, or some services are running. There are multiple criteria. There's a whole set of criteria upon which we can make our conclusions, and to make sure that this verification procedure is through, we just need to have a client installed at that computer, a temporary client software, or in-connect posture, a permanent client installed. Normally, the employees have this client installed beforehand. If we don't have such a client installed at the first connection attempt, when we are put in the quarantine, we can get and install this application. We can put it as a URL link, and then we'll be redirected to Cisco IS portal, where we'll be prompted to download this application. Then this whole application is installed and the verification process is conducted. Then in the Cisco IS new release we have an option of running the condition procedure evaluation without this client, but it has some additional requirements. So normally we have to have administrator rights to get access to that, and special scripts will also be engaged. Once this procedure has been initiated, some notifications will be made at further steps, whether if we would like to get unlimited access to the network. Now we have limited access and we are limited to a certain zone where we have to run the fixes. We'll have to run the fixes either manually on the automatic mode. We can automatically install the updates. For example, if it runs Windows, we can put this device in the quarantine segment and automatically get it prompted to install all of the necessary updates. Or we can launch the firewall or disengage some of the services. Then we will run the scanning procedure, and if everything runs well, the changes take place and you will get full access to the network. Then all the other conditions are tested and verified, like, for example, the belonging to the Active Directory, and on condition of that, you will be granted specific access to the network and its components. Basically, I'm done with this presentation, but I would like to add in the end that to implement that, we'll have to have a deployed Cisco IS solution, and we'll have to get posture licenses acquired to utilize that, and also the equipment should be available that supports all that, that equipment that will be connecting the devices, and not all of the items support that, and would also need to have a license, Apex license for that. Now we are running to microsegmentation and Cisco TrustSec. Basically, what we need this segmentation. This segmentation would help us decrease the risks of information security and mitigate the damage done when they try to attempt and penetrate through the perimeter. Let's just consider the segmentation and identify its pluses and minuses. With the segmentation of networks, we need to address three key tasks. The first one is to identify the belonging of the customer to the network. Then we need to isolate the traffic from the traffic of other users. It's done by creating specific virtual topologies and using VLANs, for example, VRFs, and the third task is to get access to all those resources where they will have to get access only, and all the others will have to be blocked. And it's done by the filtration of the addresses, by the access control policies at network devices and the firewall rules. The traditional methods of resolving these tasks 2 and 3 require quite a lot of manual labor, and the more dynamics there in the segments, the more noticeable it becomes. So there may be a need to identify a new role for the users, and if we divide the roles by VLAN, we'll have to segregate the new VLAN, the new subnet, do all of the routing, and apply all of the rules to the gate. It's quite a lot of manual work, and the access control rights can also be changed depending on the security requirements of the users. And some geographical changes to the group of users are also possible. So the segmentation have to be put to the different parts of the network. For example, we'll have to put that VLAN through some other areas in our network. So this segmentation support becomes more difficult the more groups we have. the more groups of users will have to support, and all of the rules are put upon the rules, and it's kind of difficult to work with them. And the use of the IP addresses actually limits our opportunities, and we are quite heavily connected to the topology of the network. And very often, we've got so many lists. We have control entries. And sometimes admins don't really know why they did all that. And with time, all of these lists go bigger and bigger. And it happens because of the number of the lines is defined by the following formulas. The number of the addresses multiplied by destinations and permissions, sources, destinations, permissions. For example, right here we have S1, S2, S4, and they interact with D1 and D2, have the same permission, 4 permissions. And we can actually measure the number of ACEs, for example, 24 ACEs. 24 ACEs as goes here. With the S2 and S5 sources, they interact with the D3, D4, D5, and they have 6 permissions. And they have this formula, and we get 36 ACEs, and we have a separate user, source 6, which is connected to D5 server, and we've got 4 ACEs. The number of these ACEs can be reduced because the number of ACEs uses quite a lot of resources. So how would be doing that? So you can see it here.
По группам, то есть это users 1, users 2, и, в принципе, серверы тоже находятся в отдельной группе servers. Можно сказать, грубо говоря, это VLAN. Но что здесь происходит? Тут, несмотря на то, что у нас есть такое деление по группам, это такая базовая сегментация, на самом деле, которая достаточно часто может встретить у заказчиков. У нас, например, пользователь S1
so the S1 user and S2 users, they belong to the same segment, but they have different roles.
И несмотря на то, что они находятся в одной группе, им, то есть, получается, нужна сегментация.
Belong to the same group, they still need segmentation. The same applies to the S2 and S5 sources and S6 as well. And all of these servers have the similar situation. They belong to the same big network, although they can be put into different segments. And if we do it like that, the S1, S3, and the S4 sources would be put into one VLAN. Destinations D1 and D2 will be put into different VLAN, and the number of ACEs will be reduced from 24 to only 4. But it all requires quite a lot of changes, so we'll have to allocate new VLANs, new addresses, and it's all quite difficult to do, and it's not always possible. So therefore, in order to do away with all of these difficulties, Cisco has developed the TrustSec technology, which provides us with the specialized 16-bit security groups. 16-bit security groups. These groups would be appointed to the users in Cisco IS based upon the results of the authentication of the users. And the network infrastructure applies all of these access policies and the rules based upon them. And these rules are set by the admin in a centralized way by Cisco IS, and they are automatically loaded there as the special list, SGICL.
by using different types of connectivity, wired and wireless, using servers, help us get a uniform control policy based upon Cisco TrustSec, and we no longer have to connect to the network topology. We can implement a few segments, or the users of different segments can belong to the same role, they can share the same role, and it does not require any additional settings, for example, with VLAN. So we don't have to allocate the new network, do the routing. And with use of the TrustSec, we can take all of the users in the same segment and help them interact with one another. So there is one mark appointed to them, and we cannot allow them to interact with anyone else but themselves. So we cannot be afraid of the virus spreading around our network if we impose such restrictions. The SGT is appointed dynamically or statically by the network infrastructure, and then the TrustSec starts working with all that. And to do the tags properly, for example, the switch, we need to have this tagging supported at hardware level, and there are some pluses and minuses here. As far as pluses go, well, it of course saves the resources of the network and equipment. You don't need to use control plane to store IP SGT in memory, and we have quite a sizable scalability options. But as far as minuses go, not all of the devices support hardware tagging, and if it gets to a non-Cisco device which does not read the tags, this frame will not comply to the standard. So you need to bear that in mind. You can send these with direct tagging, so the information will be done directly in Cisco equipment, and if not all of the devices belong to Cisco and support hardware tagging, so that we can use in this case the SXP protocol, which allows us to send these tags to the devices which do not support tagging. So the tagging protocol at the slide is shown here. Authentication, then spreading, where we put it, and reinforcement, where we reinforce this policy. What would be the convenience? Administrator is already working with the centralized matrix, and it's done in Cisco IS, and the matrix is showing the targets here, and it's put in the SG-ISL. So it's either simple permit denial, or you may allow it in a more sophisticated way, analyzing, and not just by permit deny. And it's defined not by the IP address, but by SGT. So as far as Cisco IS goes, it is done automatically. When the TrustSec policy is conducted, they can use push commands, or they can update this policy on their equipment. All these devices can update these policies during the course of their lifetime. And the switches use this SG as a hardware mode, so it does not actually affect the performance. Then I would like to show you the performance of the SGACL in the real conditions. We have 30 users which will get access with 4 types of access for each particular resource. As a source, we put any, 30 addresses, and 4 permissions, and we get 120 ACs. Well, it's not always good to do it like that, because not all of the people need to get access to such servers. And then the traditional firewall filtration by source, when we have all of these particular sources and destinations and permissions. So we have 48,000 ACs. Seems like nobody is doing it these days. It's taking too much labor. Or, for example, you can use it by the principles of subnet. And as a source, we put not particular host addresses, but we use subnets instead. And thus, we can get 480 ACEs. So what can we do with SGACL? We can have 4 segments by using tags, and with these tags we can mark the servers. We can segment the servers by tags depending on their condition, and the number of ACL lines goes down to 48. And in the end, I would like to show you the TrustSec policies. So, for example, we've got Alice as a user. She's been authorized as the result of authentication. She had been put into the marketing group 5. All of the packets will be appointed the tag SGT5. For simplicity, let's assume that all of the devices on the slide belong to the TrustSec domain. The TrustSec belong to SGACL switch, to which Nexus 1 and Nexus 2 switches are connected, and all of these nexuses have the CRM and HR servers, CRM and HR servers connected too. The admin has cascaded down the access policy in this whole network. And let's assume that Alice has been sending the HR packet. This packet goes through the network, then it goes to the Nexus SGACL switch, which is applied this SGACL policy. And as a result of this policy, the access for this particular user is denied. This packet is removed and deleted. This is how this policy is carried out. That's the main principle. Basically, that's all I wanted to explain. I would just only like to add a few words about how we just implement this TrustSec. Not all of the devices do support this technology, as I said previously, so I have to read through the number of such devices verified at the manufacturer's site. Cisco has basic requirements that they will have to comply to, but it should be hardware compliance. Hardware compliance is necessary for that. I'm done. Thank you very much. I hope it was interesting, and thanks very much for joining me here. Aleksey, thank you very much for your very detailed presentation. Right now, we don't have any questions in the chat. I don't see them. So perhaps they will be left a little bit later. So I would like to assure you that all of your questions will be addressed to the speakers, to the appropriate speakers, and we will, of course, get in touch with you with replies. We can assure you that we'll do that. Thank you. Thank you all, and goodbye. Thank you, Aleksey. Thank you.
And we have our next presentation at 3 p.m. Moscow time. Right now, I would like to remind you that in parallel, we have these battles running, the cyber battle. Cyber Tatars and Moscow Masters are currently defending one of the battle theaters. So all of these events and the scrupulous analysis will be reported to you in Instagram if you subscribe to Inner Stage account and become our followers. Thank you.